All right, hello, and welcome back. Preds Power Hour here on a Saturday. Early morning? I don't know what noon qualifies as. Is that still morning? Is that afternoon? I don't know what noon.
When I was in college, it was early morning.
That's very true, but we're both in our 30s because Jeff's not here, and he could chime in and say that is his early morning, but the two old men on this very program would say that it's very much not the early morning for us anymore.
Yeah, Jeff was a busy man. Last night, he was out there going to see Young Gravy, so...
Okay. Should I pretend that I know who Young Gravy is, or should I just be open about not knowing it?
Wow, I'm surprised. Yeah. No, he's just a big curly-headed white dude who has like the best voice I've ever heard.
Rapper?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's hard. I mean, I'm guessing you don't use TikTok at all.
So I don't use TikTok, but I post clips every day on TikTok, and then I hop out of the app. So I just go on, and then I hop out. It's a very quick process.
Yeah, it's not a bad one, even for us old folks. But yeah, that's kind of where he got real big. But his whole thing is, ironically for Jeff, his whole thing is he's a guy who has an affinity for moms. So, yeah. So. Yeah, he was out there and he was busy. He was doing his thing, living a social life, things like that. So for me, I'm like, I'm gonna go see a concert. I've got it like planned like a couple months ahead, you know.
You're not going to Taylor Swift tonight in Nashville, correct?
Oh, well, yeah, no, no. I got the hell out of downtown last night.
Okay.
Because I know yesterday she had a show yesterday too.
Oh, I didn't know it was, so she's doing like a double night type deal?
I think so.
I guess because it's hometown and they want to break it up and they're just going to sell out both nights.
Yeah, they're at Nissan Stadium too. So it's yeah. And like I really wanted to go see at Bridgestone was Janet Jackson and Ludacris, which
she was just in Atlanta.
Yeah, I think they all were in, I think Taylor Swift was also just in Atlanta too. So yeah, but I went to work yesterday downtown and I saw at least 120 groups of women just walking around, like wearing their Taylor Swift stuff and their big rhinestone cowgirl hats and all of that. And usually that's just normal for Nashville, but it was like I walked in and my boss was like, everybody's leaving the building at 1. Like no choice. Like everybody's getting out of here because none of us need to be stuck down here for that. So the Swifties are, they even closed our parking garage. I had to buzz in to have them open the gate because apparently last time something like this happened, they had people pounding on the doors and trying to get in, and like The Walking Dead is what the valet at the parking thing said. He said it was like The Walking Dead, just Swifties everywhere trying to get in places they're not supposed to be. So
that's what it looked like at MARTA last weekend in Atlanta for that. I don't know if you saw that of the good MARTA folks sitting down, and then they see like they're coming up to the stop, and it's just walls and walls of high school, college age, and mid-20 girls just standing, waiting to flood the MARTA station. Is there a MARTA equivalent in Nashville? I don't know.
I mean, they have a bus, but it's not.
It's not underground.
No.
Okay.
No,
so you gotta know.
It's kind of, it's
public
travel. Transportation in Nashville is a disaster.
So tonight should be crazy then, like because all these people trying to get Uber. Oh my goodness, it sounds like a disaster.
It really, really does. And
yesterday was Cinco de Mayo, so you have that combination. Goodness gracious, Nashville must have just been an absolute war zone last night.
Big holiday for white folks, I think, yesterday. So. I mean, everybody kept saying like we're getting out of here early because of the Taylor Swift concert, but like 4 of the people in the office were going home early by going to Mexican restaurants.
Yeah.
So I'm not. I haven't received any text messages to see how any of that went, but I'm pretty sure I've got some coworkers who are down and out for the count right now. So
I could see that.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of down and out for the count, the Nashville Predators. Because their season's over, Bryan Bastin of On the Forecheck, and go subscribe to don't subscribe. Go to ontheforecheck.com, hit that bookmark button like I do. Add it to your. You can
subscribe. You got to subscribe.
You can subscribe too. It didn't sound right when I was saying that, but yeah, subscribe too.
Yeah.
And do all that good stuff because it's a great new site. Looks good, and there's still great content over there, and a lot of other good NHL SB Nation sites are now on that platform. So go subscribe and all that good stuff all across those different pages. So, Bryan, Juuse Saros, Jeff and I, we saved this for you. It didn't feel right for us to talk about Juuse Saros without Bryan Bastin on last week's Preds Power Hour. So, player review series continues on here. season review series, and Juuse Saros, your guy, your mixed emotions guy, because his replacement just right there. You love Askarov, you love Saros. Eventually that will come to a head. Not at this moment.
Not now.
Not right now. What did you make of the 2022-2023 Juuse Saros season for Nashville?
You ever seen Varsity Blues, Chase?
I have.
Yeah, I figured I was going to ask that question, and then Jeff would look at us blankly.
Jeff would have no idea what we're talking about now.
I'd like to use a quote from that on how I'd rate his season 1 through 10. 10. just 10. I'm gonna save some of the words in that for another time, but it's 10. And if you've seen the movie, you know what scene that's from, and so I'm not gonna go into more details. But absolutely fantastic. I mean, Juuse Saros put in 64 games this season, which was tied for the lead with Connor Hellebuck, which is it really is incredible, that he put in that much, especially with Kevin Lankinen putting in a pretty decent performance. They rode Juuse Saros as hard as they could, and thankfully he made it through the whole season, without any injuries. So, I mean, there's very little that I can sit there and say that Juuse Saros should have improved on. I mean, he had maybe the worst Nashville defense in the last 5 to 6 years in front of him. As the season went on, he lost goal support it seemed like every week. He was losing a former 20, 30, 40 goal scorer. I mean, by the end of the season, we all saw what the roster looked like, and he was still putting up. I mean, again, there was 3 games left before they were finally technically eliminated from the playoffs. So with everything that happened this season, it's pretty incredible that, they got to where they were. This should have probably been a season where they finished, 6th in the Central or something, but they pulled it out, and a lot of that, I say a lot of it, almost all of it had to do with Juuse Saros. If you look at places Evolving Wild for their advanced analytics, led the entire league in goals saved above expected, which I think is one of the better metrics for goalies. It's just basically looking at the quality of shots that they face, and how many of those, how many goals did they save based on the quality of shots. So you can look at a guy like Linus Ullmark, where he had a fantastic season, and he's one of those guys that if he wins the Vezina Trophy for best goaltending, I'd understand, especially if, he was playing for Boston. Boston went on this historic season run before they choked. You got guys like him, but I think Juuse Saros had done really just a ton. I think Ullmark is a guy that could very well win, but I think if you compare it to him and Ilya Sorokin, who I think is probably a little bit more worthy of a winner than Linus Ullmark. The quality of shots that Sorokin and Saros faced was nothing like Boston. Which, credit to Boston, that's not really against Ullmark because he can't control that his team was good in front of him until the playoffs. And so, you look at him, he saved 51.4 goals above expected, which is insane because he faced almost 1,900 shots this season. Actually, no, that was Sorokin. Sorry. Saros faced 2,100 shots this season in 2 more games. So, I think that from what Saros faced, that's one of the big things in his favor. There was no better penalty killing goaltender in the league than there was with Juuse Saros, and as we know, Nashville has a little bit of a penalty problem. But as the season went on, the penalty kill was awful, but as the season went on, he really bounced back, and it's not like the job got easier for him. He really had to face a lot. You're losing guys like Matthias Ekholm, one of the better penalty killers. You're losing guys like Tanner Jeannot, who was an excellent penalty killer. Roman Josi after a while, which he doesn't do a ton of penalty killing, but by the time it hit the end of the season, he was doing some. But he lost all that. So you're sitting here with basically the Milwaukee Admirals in front of you for the most part, and it didn't even matter to Saros. And he had some games giving up 4 or 5 goals towards the end there, but I can't blame him for that. I mean, again, if you had Pee Wee hockey in front of you, you're gonna let some in too, I think. So. I can't. I mean, I think I said before the season that I guaranteed that Saros would be a finalist, which I don't think they've announced the Vezina finalists yet. And I will be flipping cars and setting couches on fire if not. But
who do you think it is, though? Your non-Saros fan guess.
I would say it's going to be Sorokin and Ullmark for sure. I mean, I don't think there's any argue. I think because this is one of the few postseason votes that the GMs vote on. And so I could see them calling, Vasilevsky, which he was a top 5, or Hellebuck, another top 5 goaltender. I mean, they're not awful choices. You know, if Saros got left out, it's not like there were these guys that went in that were undeserving. But, you know, compare some guys to you know, Juuse Saros. Everybody's undeserving, to be quite honest. So, but you know, I could see it. I also think that maybe the GM thing might work in their favor, because the GMs are like, oh, you know, this is David Poyle's last hurrah. This is the only player that got nominated for anything, or probably will get nominated for anything. So that might do it. But I think that, you know, I can say that there is a very, very strong argument for Juuse Saros. I think the biggest thing against him, and because it's GM's voting, is wins. I think he only had 2 shutouts the whole season. I was there for both of them, oddly enough. Which one of them was with my kids, so I figured that maybe that's my fault for not bringing my kids to more games, because he gets, you know, they shut out the Hurricanes really late in the season with my girls in the audience.
That's when you went as a fan, right?
Exactly, yeah. I went as a fan. It was nice. I forget that I was allowed to cheer. So, yeah, I mean, but it's. I won't be surprised if he doesn't win. I will be very surprised if he's not nominated as a finalist, as a top 3. But I mean, you know, you look at what he's done, and, you know, his save percentage about 91.8%, which is fine, which is good. I mean, you look at the guys around him. Sorkin's at 92.4, Ullmark is at 93.7. So yeah, he's got the least amount. But again, like his expected save percentage was something around like 90 or 89.2, I think is what it was. And so, you know, that's two percentage points ahead, you know, above expected. So he was facing just an onslaught. I mean, again, we talk about John Gibson all the time, but he had a very John Gibson season. You know,
and that's not a space any Preds fan wants to be in. If we're thinking about any of the last Ducks season, the last 5 to 7 years, like that's not where you want to be.
Yeah, especially not in 2017, man. That would be rough. And when the Predators showed up for the Western Conference Finals and the arenas were half empty at puck drop, you know. But traffic, I guess, in California is pretty rough. I'm sorry, I'm reliving old beefs because we haven't been close to that level of success again. But
yeah, I mean, hey, like, it's also weird. They're kind of I think it's like 40 minutes outside of LA. It's not technically close. I don't know. It's one of those where they call it LA and it's not really LA, because you have Los Angeles, right? Angels of Anaheim, and it's like it's not really Anaheim and LA are kind of distant. And
I'll tell you a secret. I always thought that growing up that the team was at Disneyland because, you know.
Also, just go back to the Mighty Ducks. Like, I understand, like, it's a better branding, one of the best logos in hockey history, obviously. Or just really if you can't go back, their logo stinks. Like, their color scheme is not good. Their logo stinks. Like,
the team stinks.
Just all kinds of F's. But they have good fans. Like, there's a lot of good podcasts, like Forever Mighty. I think the Puck Podcast guys, at least one of them is a Ducks guy. A lot of good hockky folks over there who cover and watch the Ducks.
Look at you knowing about Forever Mighty, my boys over there. So
yeah, no, they're good. They're good. So there you go. I'll say this as we put a bow on Juuse Saros this season. Of the goalies that you mentioned, what do they do better than Juuse that Juuse can work on and get better at to reach that point in his prime here in Nashville?
I'm going to be completely honest, and it sounds like a joke answer, but just have a better team in front of him. I mean, his rebound control, I mean, because one of his things when he was backing up Pecorino, and they split games about 60-40, was that Pecorino was always very good at controlling rebounds, and Saros had an issue with that. I think last season, with Saros starting, he had actually had a better season with controlling rebounds than Pekka had ever had in the last, 5 or 6 years. So he's gotten that much better. It got a little bit worse this season, but again, you know, considering what he was having to face, I don't blame him at all. But I mean, it's just, I mean, I can't, if I'm looking at him from a technical standpoint, his footwork is, I mean, he's the most technically sound goaltender in the NHL. I will, you know, put my foot down and say that. I mean, there's a guy who is, you know, Short King, because it's Short King Spring. You know, it's the only thing ESPN commentators talk about because they don't know anything else about the players. But I mean, he's technically sound. His lateral movement is insane. He is maybe, again, like if you're a guy like Askarov, especially like Askarov, where you've got a ton of raw talent, but you've got to refine it down, there's not a better role model, I think, to watch, because Saros is not that guy that's sprawling out, who's making those acrobatic, you know, like insane saves. You don't see him coming out of the crease, you know, too far and getting a long shot past him. I mean, to really be honest, that's really all the only thing I can think of about him needing to improve. I'd like to see him play at slightly less games next year so he doesn't get injured.
That would be nice.
Yeah, and maybe the playoff hunt would have ended a little bit earlier if he'd been injured, but
also that might be a good thing though for you if you're able to, like, the games that he's out and it's just Askarov, like that's just like the perfect world for you where he just gets those spot starts.
Well, and I don't think we're going to see Askarov too much next season either, because I think Lankinen got extended that year.
Yeah.
So, and that's fine. That's good. The longer they take with Askarov, the happier I am personally, just because goaltenders are weird. I mean, just voodoo. No clue what goes into them, why they do what they do. They're all very, very weird.
It's like the closers of hockey.
Yeah. I mean, my brother told me, he's a youth hockey coach, and he told me, he says when they have like the kids show up to, for like learn to play hockey or something like that, they're like, they know within 5 minutes which kid's going to be a goaltender because they just pick the weirdest one, and it always works out. Yeah.
I guess you kind of have to be to want like puck, like to welcome pucks just great, like just coming at you with unbelievable velocity over and over and over again, and you're not really moving. You don't get to move around and have fun and speed around the ice like everybody else does. It's a different kind of personality altogether to want to do that. It's
a
lot of gear,
so much gear. It's so expensive. So and it's just one of those. So I mean, I honestly cannot say there's something he needs to improve on, because he had I think he had a better season than Pekka did when Pekka won the Vezina.
But like you said, better team.
Yes, obviously. So
that matters.
It does matter a whole lot, because the Boston people are like, oh, we won the Jennings Trophy, which I think may be one of the dumbest postseason awards in any sport, which is just literally, it goes to the two goaltenders with the most wins combined. So just give it to the President's Trophy winner, and that's it. That's what you do. There's your answer. It's a dumb award. Just like they don't bring out the Langway as a major award, which is an award for best defensive defenseman, which Matthias Ekholm would have won like 4 times, I think, in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, I can't say anything bad. Juuse Saros is an incredible dude. He still looks like a teenager to me when he takes his pads off. But he's got that mustache, which people love to hate on, but I think it looks great. Not many people know the struggle. Kiefer Sherwood. So he's back in Milwaukee. Somebody asked him up there in Milwaukee if he's growing a playoff beard, and the man, again, being a half Japanese person like myself, he looked at them and just like, I'm trying my absolute best, which he's in his 20s. So sorry, Kiefer, you got about 10 more years before you can reliably grow a beard. So
it's crazy. Like, I people think I'm joking, but I'm like, I get a little bit more every time I shave. Like, I'm gonna have a full beard at like 45, but it's a little bit more. Like, I thought I'd be done. Like, I thought I was just only gonna have like a goatee possibility, but every time I shave, it's just a little bit more, and I'm like, and it's actually kind of annoying. Like, I now have spots where I'm having to like, I just have random hair. Like, it's just, I always kind of wanted the option. Yeah. But then as you get into it, as you know, like, it's another thing to keep up with. Like, it's not, it's another thing to keep up with every day.
Yeah. And I've been told I'm not allowed to shave my beard anymore. But you don't have to worry about this. Maybe not yet. I don't know, but, excellent for hiding the whole double chin situation too. So yeah,
there you go.
Or giving you a jawline, which helps in my case as well. But yeah, Juuse Saros, fantastic season. I would say A+, because again, I can't sit and point at a thing. Shutouts, I can't blame him for having 2. That's not, it's not on him. I mean, I would say he stole at least 15, 16 games this season, as far as just like based on what he faced, what the Preds did. I mean, he was excellent in those like 2-goal games where it was just like 2-1 or 2-0, things like that. If Nashville could get a little bit of a lead for him, he was shutting it down every single time. I mean, I'm trying to think of, I can't remember the closer's name because it's been like 2 decades since I played fantasy baseball, but I always used to pick Gagne. Right?
Oh, Eric Gagne.
Yeah. I used to always take him like in the second round of fantasy baseball drafts, just because it's always nice not to have to worry about getting a save.
I used Brian Wilson was my dude, the Giants.
Beach Boy.
Giants guy. God, yeah, fantasy baseball was the king. I was talking to a buddy about that a few weeks ago, where I was like, fantasy baseball was king, but it was only king when you were younger because you had the time to like keep up with it every day. Like, that's not even negotiable for me in my adult life to keep up with that every day. No, but there's so much game of, I mean, there was so much strategy in fantasy baseball. Fantasy football, you just set your lineups and you're good to go. Fantasy baseball, you had to like, okay, let me move this guy. Oh, they're starting this week. Like, there was a lot more daily strategy, and it was a lot more fun. Like, that was the chess of fantasy sports, and checkers has always been fantasy football.
My whole move was just get Albert Pujols and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Again, thinking about how
for a long time that was a good idea.
It was a very good idea.
I have a take for you because you wanted to do. We should do we each have a hot take here that you wanted us to prepare. On the NHL season, I have one for you.
Oh, let's hear it.
So you mentioned the Boston Bruins, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing about the Boston Bruins, and this was something we saw down the stretch here this year.
Yeah.
You're seeing it in other sports a little bit. The worst thing that could have happened to the NHL regular season was the Boston Bruins getting bounced in round 1 of the NHL playoffs.
Uh-huh.
I am very, very curious to see if there are any dramatic changes to how teams, especially good teams across the NHL, value the NHL regular season going forward, where you have this all-time great year.
Mm-hmm.
Down the stretch, you were wondering who should sit, like maybe, and then there was a lot of uproar where it's like Boston's starting to sit some dudes, Boston's starting to be a little bit careful, and Boston's already, and then they still lose in the first round, upset by the Panthers.
Mm-hmm.
All-time great team. Like, we're regular season team, like just one of the most talented teams like ever. Like, even the Panthers were just like, we don't know how we did that. Like, that was one of those, you listen to the players and the coaches after, they're like, we still don't really understand how this happened this way.
Mm-hmm.
My take is I think you're going to see fans start to get upset because I think you're going to see more teams devalue just pouring it on and being an elite regular season team. And I think the Bruins are going to be the poster child for this now.
Well, and so that's interesting because, you think back to a couple of different seasons. First, you look at the year that the Predators won the President's Trophy, and that was one where it wasn't decided until pretty late in the season. Boston was just so good that we knew probably at 75% through the season, like it was almost impossible for them not to win it. And so it was a lot different than, say, like when Tampa a few years back came in with an amazing season and got bounced in the first round. It was a little bit different than that, but I can understand what your point on that one. It's just that you see these teams where they've got guys who are injured, and so they find a way to kind of stash them on IR until the playoffs start. And a lot of people hate that. I think if it's if you're not technically breaking the rules, then why not use it, right?
And teams are just not going to care about these regular season trophies or having the best record. They're just like, you get the right matchup, like, who cares? Like, I'd rather just, because that's all we're going to care, the fans are going to care about at the end anyway. Like, Bruins fans aren't going to care that you had this iconic, unbelievable season. Like, you lost to the Panthers in round 1. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's what's rough. I mean, it was a great series. I mean, if you got to see any of it, fantastic hockey to watch. And Florida, I wasn't sure they were going to make the playoffs because they were one of those teams that kind of retooled a little bit, and Bobrovsky, sorry, turn in your badge and gun, Bobrovsky. It's one of those where, like, you could see it happening. It was less of a surprise, I think. Not looking at the records aside, it was less of a surprise than when Columbus did it to Tampa a few years back. But that's also again, I look fondly back on that series because I always appreciate what Columbus did that season and just absolutely loading up for the playoffs for 1 year and then falling apart the next. Like, teams say they go for it, but like that's the only example I can think of a team truly going for it. And it didn't work, but they beat the Lightning in that first round. So, but yeah, it's a good point. I can see that. I think it just depends on how it does. Like another team that has a season like Boston where they're so far ahead for the entire season, I think maybe they'll start kind of maybe resting some guys, but I think a lot of it, a lot of hockey people also say that like resting them too long makes them rusty, and then they come into the playoff series. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Just because this is the second time this has happened in a few years. Yeah. I remember the time I saw the final game in that playoff series with the Tampa Bay Lightning. I was with my kid at Chuck E. Cheese, and I'd asked them to turn a TV. So. It's been a little bit of time. I think it was before the littlest one was even born, maybe. So
there you go.
Yeah. I can see, like, what hot take do I want to use today? And Jeff's not here for this one, unfortunately, because I knew he'd do it. My hot take is I don't think there are a lot of good coaching candidates out there right now. And I don't know if the team has a plan for Karl Taylor or not. But if Karl Taylor is not an option, which I think is a decent option for him, and looking at the coaching, there's not.
Wait, who are we talking about right now?
I'm talking about with John Hines. So
okay, I was going to say you didn't clarify. Okay, yeah,
yeah, my bad. But I think the Preds' best course of action right now is to just let him finish the contract because there's not somebody out there. I think I would prefer to have a different coach, but I don't think there's a coach out there that would be an upgrade because the NHL is so incestuous when it comes to hiring coaches.
They just love retreads.
Yeah, the coaching tree in the NHL is a wreath. Just that's all it is. And I was a big fan of hiring Gerard Gallant a few years back before he got picked up. I've always liked. I will say I am surprised with Dallas's coach with Peter DeBoer because I thought he was awful with San Jose and I thought he'd continue to be awful with the Stars. But Jason Robertson and company had other ideas. But I don't see a guy outside of Karl Taylor or somebody from overseas that would be a massive upgrade that when you look as a team in the position that they'll be next year with rebuilding, they've got all these draft picks, they got a new GM. I don't think you want to bring that coach in because next year's going to be a big evaluation year, kind of like this year was. You're going to see who these young guys are, starting them the season in the NHL and seeing how well they do.
Doesn't that make sense for Karl Taylor then?
It does, absolutely. But I don't know if that will happen or not. And if it's going to happen, they should probably start working on that now, just because he's going to be in high demand, and it'll be a big failure for Trotz, I think, if they don't hire Karl Taylor, which that itself isn't a bad thing. But if he goes somewhere else, I think that would be a big issue.
But when is a Nashville product gone somewhere else and it backfired for Nashville?
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm sure that you can't look at almost every single NHL team in the playoffs right now that has a Predator that's out there balling. Matthias Ekholm with the Oilers, Eeli Tolvanen with Seattle. I mean, the list goes on. Nick Cousins in Florida. I mean, Freddie Gaudreau and Ryan Hartman in Minnesota before they got bounced out. I mean, I've always been kind of known for being a huge fan of Freddie Gaudreau, but that was because he was the guy who was an AHL guy who came in. The team was so injured in the finals that he came in and was great, and he played for a couple more years. But I mean, he's been like half the season in Minnesota on in the top 6. So maybe I wasn't wrong. But I mean, you got lots of guys. But Karl Taylor's a guy that he came he was an assistant coach with Dallas beforehand, and I think that he is a guy that can be. It's going to be tough. You don't have any head coaching experience, but again, that sort of thing doesn't matter. It's kind of more about who you know.
It's also just the expectations don't matter, and he's having this great run with Milwaukee, and it, like you said, next year's an evaluation year. Like every Preds fan knows that next year is not about winning the cup. No. They understand.
So it'll be very, very interesting to see. I think that. I can't think of a coach that someone would say, hey, the Preds went out and hired this guy that would make Preds fans happier than Karl Taylor. And for honestly, there's nobody, unless like a playoff team fires their coach after they lose, I don't see a guy out there that's worth it. I mean, you'd just be better off sticking with Hines because then you're not, trying to get a new system put in for these players or whatever. So I just think, and that hot take, I do apologize because that hot take was perfectly tailored for, no pun intended, by the way, tailored for Jeff being here so I could see him writhe uncomfortably in his chair and try not to yell.
I think he would be uncomfortable just talking about the Sutton firing in a certain column about why Sutton was actually fired. And folks, let me tell you, Brian, this is like maybe we can wrap with the Admirals playoff run here, but I don't know if you're like this, but like people who get riled up about stuff like that cracks me up because I'm like, this is such a deranged sports columnist column that just don't exist anymore. Like so many of those columns have just disappeared from just newspapers and just sports in general because that's just getting phased out. When I come across those, it delights me. Where I go through it and I'm like, this is incredible. Like I don't get these anymore. It's like play the hits, play the old column hits where I'm like, this is terrible, but it's great. I love those. It's 5 minutes of my day. It cracks me up.
there are still some of those out.
What
in
a
hockey.
take!
There's some of those still out in hockey, and I do enjoy them when I see them. The problem is that it's not like a guy where like you've talked to him or you've worked with him or something, and you're like, he's pretty knowledgeable about his sport, but this is kind of his whole hot take. Hockey still has those guys who just shouldn't be covering hockey or maybe even talking to the public, period, and still somehow have a job. I'm talking about subtweeting's not the word, 'cause that's not what I'm doing, but I'm being very vague about I'm being very vague about one or two certain reporters that are just garbage. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, go ahead and search on YouTube Nathan McKinnon post game bad question, because that'll lead you in the right direction to who I'm talking about. Which if you haven't, Chase, please, my God, you have to watch it. It's hilarious.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I do kind of miss that. But the problem is with hockey too is that those types of opinions are usually limited to columns like, people shouldn't be putting their values on these players, and
that's a different kind of thing. Yeah, that's a totally different kind of column. Like those suck, and those being punted from the ethos is just completely fine by me. But when it's just like a straight up like, actually, the team didn't work as hard because they didn't like that he was mean to them. And you're like, what a column. Oh, I love this take. Where is it going? Where you're like, that was the problem. Yeah.
It's like my favorite take, which is that Roman Josi is not a good captain because he's not out on the ice yelling at them.
Yes.
That's my favorite. And that's I want to say that's a hot take, but that's not a hot take because it's held by a lot of people. Yeah. And it's like you look at Roman Josi, one of the best players in the NHL, top 10, players in the NHL right now, and they're like, he's not a good captain because he doesn't yell like Mike Fisher did. I'm like, Mike Fisher was fine, but he wasn't that great. Like he wasn't a good player. Let's be honest. Like he hadn't been a player by the time he came back for a second stint with Nashville. He hadn't been good in some time. It's just that I think the Preds wanted to secure Carey to do the anthem during the playoffs that year.
But yeah, there you go. Yeah. Don't write like dog shit columns like what we're talking about. Whether it's xenophobic, transphobic, anything like that. That kind of stuff can get punted from the ethos. But if you want to write a column where you're 700 words and like, actually, this player's not a leader because I haven't seen it from him. He doesn't seem like he grimaces enough mid-game. That's a column I want to read because that's hilarious. That's a good column.
And speaking of columns that were really good and kind of out there was The Athletic. They just talked to Snoop Dogg, oddly enough, about buying the Ottawa Senators. And my God, it was so good to hear him say something that like everybody else has been saying for years, but hockey folks can't get in there. Like, Connor McDavid's the best player in the NHL. Why isn't he on commercials everywhere? And I get that. Part of the reason maybe is because Connor McDavid has the personality of a single baked potato rotating in a microwave, which is fine. That's what the NHL does to people. But, but I just thought that was great. That was one of those where you get that outsider in there and they're just like, what are you guys doing? And we're all like, thank you. Thank you. Like honestly, I've been a football guy my entire life. Hockey's maybe my favorite sport in the entire world now. And it's just like, you wouldn't know it. I mean, like I kind of stumbled upon watching hockey and realized how great it was because they don't market. And it's impossible. I mean, I pay for 3 different streaming services and I still couldn't. I had to go and find like a VPN and a site to like stream certain games because the NHL makes it so hard. AHL, my phone, I've got every AHL playoff game that I can access with home or away broadcast feeds. Just a single click. And if the AHL does it better than the NHL, they've got a problem. So point that out. But speaking of AHL, and I know we got a few time. We got time for this one?
We're gonna do can you do a 2-minute Admirals beat? All right, let's do a 2-minute Admirals playoff update. Bryan.
Yes, so Admirals, great. They had a great season. They finished and it went into the best of 5 series with home ice advantage. So they picked, which I think is kind of cool. They got to pick that they started the first 2 games in Manitoba. They won that first one 6-2. I thought things looked great. The next 2 games, one in Manitoba, one in Milwaukee. They lost both in overtime, and so came into a game last night down 2-1 in a 5-game series. So it was elimination time, and it'd be a huge disappointment if Milwaukee won, but they did come back. They and opened up with like a 4-1 lead going into the third. Manitoba decided to make it 4-3 before they finally put one away. But so the series is tied 2-2. Manitoba and Milwaukee. The final game of the series is in Milwaukee tonight at 6 p.m. I believe Central, 7 p.m. your time, Chase. And I do want to highlight some of these guys that have come out there, Askarov has been fine. He actually only, he only had to face 19 shots last night, which is good. But two of the guys I think who have made a huge difference for the Milwaukee Admirals are two of my favorite players, Kiefer Sherwood and Luke Evangelista. And, these are guys that when I went to morning practice a couple times after they had been in Nashville, they stayed after everybody else was on the ice, just passing, like taking slap shots, doing all that type of stuff. And you can see, I think on all 4 of Luke Evangelista's goals in the postseason so far, Kiefer Sherwood has assisted on all of them. And so these guys, they had a connection in Nashville. They have a connection in Milwaukee. This is a massive game tonight. Make sure you're watching it. AHL TV is great. You can get really cheap deals for watching just the playoffs or single game day access. So get it in on that. You get to see Askarov. Jordan Gross actually, has had another guy who spent some time in Nashville, another great one. But it's just been a little bit rough. They've had slow starts. Manitoba has scored really early in a lot of these games. So it'll be a huge game. The crowd will be insane. Make sure you're watching that because I don't want the Admirals to be done. I'd like to keep watching these playoffs, and I think they have what it takes. But we're going to see that. So make sure you're watching the ads. Love them. You can get a good look at your future head coach, hopefully, and go out there and go Admirals.
There you go. We'll end on this. 10 seconds. Percentage that Karl Taylor is the coach of the Preds next year, right now, May 6th. Percentage point.
65%.
Oh, I thought you were going to go under 50.
No, I'm gonna say because again, I just don't see anybody else out there that would be worth a damn. But again, I've said that before, and look what happened. So
there you go.
As long as it's not, we have one person that's unacceptable to be the head coach.
I feel
again,
like I know who this is,
and that would be Peter Laviolette. So
yeah. And I would also say that if it's not Karl Taylor, it's probably Peter Laviolette.
Let me tell you, if it's Peter Laviolette, that means that every coach.
It's a wreath, Bryan.
Yeah, I'd be like, well, I was gonna say like all of Nashville's coaches would have been like worked in the organization again. Trotz, Laviolette, Hines. That's it. So.
Well, we would have a Daryl Ravel type podcast with you and Jeff, where it would just be, I feel terrible for our country, but this is tremendous content.
Yeah,
that's what it would be with that kind of hire. It'd be great.
Yeah,
great content. Well, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at ontheforecheck.com this week, Bryan?
Well, I'm sure there'll be a lot, but I will be in Las Vegas next week. So I got a conference for work. I am doing my absolute best to see if I can't sneak into a Vegas playoff game. I get the feeling I probably won't.
I think you could.
Yeah, we'll see how that works out.
Never say die, Bryan.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to be in Vegas for a week by myself, which you would think like 10 years ago, I'd be like, hell yeah, let's get going.
A week sounds like a long time in Vegas. A week in Vegas sounds long.
It is, but I'm not paying for any of it, so I can handle that. And I'm doing that as working. I'm not taking time off because I'm there for work, which is... So
there you go.
Yeah, but there should be some good stuff. I'm going to try to record videos for Renegades of Puck while I am in Vegas.
There you go.
We will see, no promises. Hopefully I still have videos to record depending on how tonight goes. So by the time y'all are listening to this, this whole me talking about Milwaukee may be null and void. But yeah, make sure you check that out. I'm sure Jeff will have something. Yeah, it's a little bit of a slow time. We're getting ready to kind of jump start the site as far as getting our paid tier set up, things like that. That's where we're kind of hoping to provide things like my actual footage from post game when I'm recording post game media, letting the readers get that. Doing some like individual streams, having a stream where people can come on to questions and ask questions and use it as a podcast. But so things like that. So look out for that. We'll have more information throughout the summer since the season's over. And then by the time I get back, it's going to be time fully to start preparing for the draft, and I'm sure that we'll have quite a few talks about the draft as we end into it, as they descend on Music City, which will be slightly less insane than Taylor Swift being here. So
there you go, slightly less. Bryan Bastin, always a pleasure, and I will talk to you next week.
Well done, nephew. Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.